appreciate you coming today. This is a speech for my SCOMM 345 class at Liberty University. The topic that I'm going to be discussing today is a very difficult topic to discuss, but it's one that needs to be discussed. And chances are it's affected each of you, even though you have no idea that it's affected you. If I told you that there's a drug that's almost as addictive as cocaine that is absolutely sweeping our country, what would you guess that it is? Would you guess that it's crack or alcohol or cigarettes? No, the answer is pornography. And the reason why pornography is so deadly is that $3,500 is spent every second on the use of pornography. It is a multi-billion-dollar company, and it has impacted 56% of divorces. When people have been in their interviews for divorces, they have said they had no idea that the other partner was involved in pornography. It's like taking a flower garden and planting it and not taking care of the weeds, because the weed is pornography, because it takes all the intimacy out of a relationship and ultimately leads to divorce. So how do people get involved in pornography? Most are not even aware that they're getting involved in pornography. It starts out as a curiosity, and then it ends up and it spirals into something that's out of control. It starts very innocently, and before people know it, they are hooked in, locked in to this bondage that they can't seem to get out of. Statistics tell us that 79% of men outside the church are involved in pornography. And you may think that because the church is a place where we study and worship Christ, and we study about God's Word, that number is different for the people in the church, but it's not. The same number of men and women who participate in pornography are the same number that in the church are the same number that participate outside of the church. And this is causing our churches and our spiritual leaders to try to come up with a solution to this problem. You may not think that you've been impacted by pornography, but studies have shown us that 7 out of 10 men admittedly look at pornography at least once a month. And of those, the looking at the pornography has turned into an addiction. The topic of pornography is fuzzier than other addictions because it's such a difficult topic to talk about. I dare say that it's one that any of us finds easy to talk about, but it's definitely one that we all need to talk about and come up with a solution to the problem. There are 5 stages to a pornography addiction, and shockingly, the pornography addiction occurs in almost the second time you look at pornography, an addiction occurs. It starts with early exposure. For example, you go to a website to go shopping, and all of a sudden a pornographic image pops up, and you look at it, and before you know it, your senses and these chemical firings in your brain, just like any other drug, starts to fire, and your curiosity is piqued and you go to another website. The addiction, as I said, happens in the second stage of the 5-stage process. The third stage is escalation, where you go from looking at nude pictures to more pornographic detail. The 4th stage is when you become desensitized to those images and you seek to find other images that are almost XXX in nature and look for those stimulations as well. Each time there's an escalation happening that you're not even aware of, and before you know it, you're bound into bondage of pornography addiction. The last stage of pornography addiction is acting out. It's when you try to find those images in a physical form, either through an affair or a dating website such as Ashley Madison. There is a solution to the problem of pornography. As I travel throughout the country with the gospel group that I sing with, I often go to our product table afterwards, and people come up to us and they talk to us about their prayer request. And one of the common denominators, and people coming up to talk to me, is that they didn't have anybody to talk to about pornography. They would say to me, I have no one to tell. My husband has been addicted to pornography. I've thought about going to find an attorney and getting a divorce, but they didn't dare tell anybody, not their friends, not their family, not anybody, because they were so afraid that it would create such a stigma, and the pain was so great that they took it upon themselves. They thought something was wrong with them. They didn't want to go to anybody to share this horrible story with them. One of the people that came to me had been married for 20 years. She had no idea that her husband was involved in a pornography addiction. She knew there was something missing in her marriage. She just couldn't figure out what it was. And then one day she happened to use his computer and found that he was having multiple affairs with many people with many women throughout the country. And she was devastated. She went to an attorney to seek his advice, and she had every intention of divorcing her husband. But what she found when she was sitting in that attorney's office was that she was remembering all the wonderful times that she and her husband had had. And so she made a commitment to save her marriage. And it started with the truth. It started with an awareness that there was a problem, and through prayer. Daily she would pray for her husband, and they decided to go to Christian counseling and try to find a remedy for their marriage. Dr. Mike Whitson, who is the senior pastor at First Baptist Church, Indian Trail, has developed a program, a cultural program, and created an entire new department for this particular problem. It's not one that's easily discussed. He has created a series of sermons called Pornography, the Private Poison. Pornography starts in private, but before you know it, it escalates into something that totally destroys marriages and makes it almost impossible to put back together. But there is a remedy. There's nothing you can do that is outside God's grace. There is no sin that is greater than God's grace. Colossians 3:5 tells us to flee from all sexual immorality. When you're dealing with this type of problem, one of the greatest solutions is not to cast judgment or condemnation. It is an addiction. And so therefore we should extend grace to the people that we're working with. But we also have to set parameters and boundaries into our relationships to keep them from returning to that negativity. Dr. Whitson says that the first step is the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Awareness, talking about the issue and seeking Christian counseling. Now there are a number of Christian counselors all over the country that are willing to address this issue, and the churches are also making this a priority. So in closing, I would invite you to look at your marriage and have an open and honest discussion with your partner, your spouse, and about pornography. It is the secret sin, but there is nothing too great. There's nothing too great for God, and no amount of sin that can keep you from God's grace.